Hello everyone and welcome to the Art of Teaching Art. Today I'm going to show you how to draw and work with coffee and tea to create interesting drawings as well as different backgrounds. So I'm going to show you some examples first. First of all, we've just got plain coffee on a background, so this has been dripped onto the page and then kind of splattered down. This one is plain coffee, but then watercolour has been added on one side. You could add a wash of coffee and then add pencil over the top of it, and you can develop that further. So you've got a wash of coffee with then a pencil, colour and pencil drawing or something on top of it. And actually it really adds texture to the page, it adds a little bit more depth, and it creates a little bit more interest in terms of the composition towards the edges of the page. You can think about doing really planned coffee in specific areas, or you can think about doing a larger wash over the whole page. The second thing is to actually draw with the coffee. So with this, I've had very strong coffee and then lighter coffee as well as a tub of water, and I've drawn out first in a watercolour pencil, but you could do it in a normal pencil, and then worked over the top with the coffee. So this was some flowers. And then I can still add my range of tones by doing my darker areas of coffee. The same with here, so this is a face. I sketched out the initial lines and then worked over the top of it, adding more layers of coffee and stronger coffee in certain areas, and then lighter areas with more watery or less strong coffee to create these two pieces. The third way you can develop is by mixing it with other materials as well, not just using the coffee on its own, but mixing with colour pencil and fine liner. So with these two pieces, I've used coffee to emphasise the edge of the face, creating layers there to create a nice soft edge, but also used fine liner with water to actually create a range of tones, and it actually creates really interesting blends and bleeds between the different materials. In this piece, I've done it again with fine liner and water with coffee, and then I've added some areas of blue watercolour pencil on top as well. The same in this piece here, only instead of just leaving the watercolour pencil to kind of bleed by itself, I've coloured large areas and then used water and the coffee to blend them out to create some different pieces. So there's a few different techniques you can use with this. So I've got some pieces of cartridge paper here. You can do it on normal printer paper and other papers as well. It's just the paper isn't as strong, so it won't be able to deal with the wetness as much. But I would suggest that you potentially do this in an area that you don't mind getting messy. The first and easiest kind of one is to make some coffee. Now this coffee is stronger than you would drink, so it's a couple of teaspoons of coffee and then with hot water to activate it. And if you do have access to a brush, the easiest thing to create a surface is just to paint some coffee over the surface of the paper to create kind of a relatively even wash. Where I've added extra coffee, that's going to be darker. It will create a really interesting texture. So that's the easiest way to kind of work with the coffee. The next one in this, if you don't have access to a paintbrush, this might be what you decide to use. So you could, if you wanted to, just take your teaspoon and you could drop puddles of coffee onto your page. You could tip it on as well if you wanted to. And if you want this to kind of splat out a little bit more, you can get another piece of paper on top and just place it down, and the coffee will kind of spill out over the sides, and then you end up with two printed pieces of paper there. So you can do different things with each one. You could work over the top of either of these as well if you wanted to. Next might be working with watercolours with your coffee as well. So I've got a watercolour palette here, and I've just got some normal water. And I'm just going to choose a brighter colour. I might actually go for this blue. So I'm going to brush the brush into the colour with water on to generate a nice amount of colour, first of all. And then just add that in sections around, and I create a kind of border around a section of it. And then you can just dip your brush into the coffee or spill some coffee on and work on top, and it's going to create some interesting colours. It's going to change kind of what you're doing with it a little bit more. you might want to do the whole thing. I've also got back here some less intense coffee, so that's going to be a lighter tone. And we can just wait for that to dry and see kind of how it comes out. You can always build up other layers if you don't quite like the look, or think about adding collage or something afterwards. You could, of course, also do the similar kind of thing with tea. So I've got a very strong cup of tea here. So I've just put a tea bag in with a little bit of boiled water, and just the same with the coffee, you could dip your brush in and go over. Now this is going to be a lot less strong. So again, you could just do a wash. You could pour the tea onto the page if you wanted to. You could also combine the two together, and you could also use the tea bag as well. So I could put my tea bag onto the page, and then obviously you don't want it to be too hot because that will burn your hand, but you could just use the tea bag. Now this is going to create a lighter wash as well. You might even want to spill some of the tea granules. You might want to dab at it to create a different texture. So think about some of the different things you can do. And other things you could do is think about using a spray bottle or something. Now this is just one that I got in a set. So this is just from, well, a refreshing foot spray. And so you can just see if it will just spray onto the paper. And again, that's going to add a slightly different texture and effect, which would look really interesting as well. So you've got a range of different ways of just applying it to the paper to create a texture for you to work on. So lastly is actually drawing with coffee. So I've got iris here, which is a little bit past its prime, as it were, but I'm going to work with this to do a drawing. So I'm going to start off with just a HB pencil first of all and do an initial sketch of this. Now I'm not aiming for this to be perfectly accurate. I'm looking for it to have a little bit of emotion in it, to work in a little bit of a looser way with the coffee and the tea. I'm going to think about the stem first. I'm going to draw the edge of the leaf coming down. So a lot looser way of sketching. And this will add texture to the drawing as well. And then my iris coming up and out. So the two lines and folding round. So just drawing the shapes I see. But just trying to be quite fluid, not moving my pencil from the paper too much. So I've got my initial drawing, and then I can work with a larger paintbrush or a smaller paintbrush. So I'm going to start with the larger paintbrush, so just a square brush, and I'm going to dip it first into the darker, deeper coffee, and I'm going to use that to create a little bit of a background to my piece, brushing upwards, making it a little bit softer. And then what I might do is just add a little bit of the spray just around, just add a bit more texture with that as well. Then I'm going to get a smaller paintbrush, and I can start with the lighter coffee, and I'm going to add that into the places that are lighter. What you will get in some areas is just where the coffee hits it, the pencil will start to kind of dissolve slightly, which is quite good. This is just a normal HB pencil. And working into some of the areas. And then with the darker coffee, working into some of the darker areas as well. So I'm building up layers. And then what you can do is working maybe with watercolour, working with pencil on top if you wanted to again. You could leave it as it is, it's a relatively unfinished kind of drawing. What you want to do is think about what really works for the piece and the flowers that you've drawn or whatever you're drawing. Think about how you can build up layers, so later on you might revisit and add some darker layers of things. I'm going to bring a bit of the tea. Hopefully this will be a slightly different colour eventually. So first of all, I'm just adding in the lightest, the kind of mid-tone areas, and leaving some of the areas where I think that there will be more highlights. And then I can work on top of that again. What you might want to do is you could, if you wanted to, add a little bit, and I mean it a little bit because you don't want it to kind of be overworked in any way, a little bit with watercolour to just add some darker areas. So I've done black with a little bit of brown here to just add a little bit of intensity, and because the page is still wet, it's going to help to kind of blend some areas together. So just in my darkest areas, I'm adding this kind of mix. It still looks really kind of soft and natural, which is really good, but it just adds that little bit more intensity to it. You could add a darker colour as well if you wanted to with this. And what I will do is kind of leave this as it is for the time being, and then come back and revisit it later. Already you can see the spread of the sprays looking quite interesting. The places where the darker coffee has come and kind of stayed, you could kind of emphasize that a little bit more. There's lots of interesting effects you can kind of achieve just from kind of household drinks. So I've let this dry a bit now, so you can see it's starting to get some darker areas. I'll probably work back into this, but I'm really liking how this is looking with the fine kind of mist of coffee at the top and the darker layers at the bottom. And then as things start to dry, they will dry in different ways. So some areas will be darker, some will get a bit more patchy and give this really rustic look. This was the one where I dotted the tea bag over, so it's looking quite nice and subtle. This one is just the wash of tea, so you can compare to the wash of coffee. This is a little bit darker, a little bit more intense than the tea. And then larger pieces where you can spray it over. Again, this is looking quite nice with the mist across it as well. A range of different things you can try out only with basic materials. Thank you so much for watching and have a really great day.